Free Speech Group for inviting me this evening. So Alan has just spoken about the right to boycott and the right of free speech. And that's a right regardless of one's position on Israel and Palestine or on the movement for BDS. As part of my commitment to speaking out and supporting the movement for peace and justice in Palestine and Israel, I'd like to speak about why I consider it my responsibility to stand in support of the movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. I understand some may not agree with my perspective, but I do hope that you'll support my right and the rights of others to express these positions. So as many of you know, in 2005, a broad coalition of Palestinian civil society called for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel until it complies with international law and ends its violations of Palestinian rights. BDS is a call for solidarity from the international community. And it is important to note, BDS is not permanent. The until is there because it applies to Israel only until it complies with basic principles of equality. I support BDS because it targets state policies. That is, it encourages a state to change particular policies and behaviors. I support BDS because it is about respect for human rights and dignity. It's not a call that came about lightly, but it grew out of decades of denial of a people's basic human and national rights. And it's for good reason that it has garnered such strong international support among concerned people, including Jews like myself, across the globe. And it has. As part of the BDS movement, groups around the globe choose targets that are appropriate to their particular context, and they vary. In the years since hundreds of Palestinian civil society organizations called for BDS, and they called for it in the spirit of the boycott divestment movement against South Africa and South African apartheid, there are many examples of BDS happening across the world. Dozens of campuses across the U.S. have passed divestment resolutions. Churches have divested from companies that profit from the occupation. And academics, artists, and performers across the world are participating in a range of boycott actions. I'd like to tackle one issue head-on, one of the attacks. The governor and other Israeli government supporters have claimed that it is anti-Semitic to support BDS. This is not only a false and highly irresponsible accusation and harmful to those fighting for justice, but it also does an injustice to the reality of actual anti-Semitism when it does occur. It is not discriminatory in any way to hold a nation-state accountable for its human rights abuses and for violations of international law. There is nothing anti-Semitic about that in any rational definition and understanding of anti-Semitism. There has been a call for Palestinians from Palestinian civil society whose community is suffering on a daily basis to join an international effort to hold Israel accountable to changing its behavior. That is ethical, and that is a call I embrace. Another attack on those of us who support BDS is that Israel is being singled out when there are so many countries with gross human rights violations. That there is abuse in many countries across the globe is of course true. But this particular call grows out of the community that is the victim of Israeli policy. It's not saying that Israel is the only human rights violator in the world. Of course not. And that is never the case with boycotts. The Great Boycott didn't claim to be the only example in the United States of the abuse of workers, but it was a coordinated grassroots effort of a community that was being seriously exploited to make change and for justice. So too with the Palestinian-led call for BDS. There are additional reasons some of us want to stand with the call for justice and equality in Palestine and Israel. For those of us who are Jewish, the Israeli government claims to speak in our name. Thousands thousands upon thousands of us in the Jewish community want to make clear it does not speak in our name. For those of us living in the United States, Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. aid. I and thousands of others do not want the U.S. to be funding Israeli government abuses as they do now. I have been part of the movement for peace and justice in Israel and Palestine for a long time, since I've been in college, actually. There have been so many different efforts for peace that have taken place. I participated in an international conference called the Road to Peace between Palestinian leaders and members of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in 1989. Interestingly, while I had been told growing up that there was no one on the other side to talk to, meaning there was nobody from the Palestinian community to talk to, representatives from every part of Palestinian society came to this conference. But unfortunately, it was very hard to get many mainstream Israelis to come, even though the principle of the conference was rooted in self-determination for both peoples. I remember, despite that, many of us feeling hopeful, and in fact, the pessimists at the conference thought there wouldn't be a Palestinian state for 5 years. I followed closely many other efforts for peace after that. Some seemed more genuine than others. But whatever one's analysis is of these different efforts for peace, the reality is that the Israeli occupation has only become further and further entrenched, and the Israeli government has become increasingly intransigent. So for many of us, we ask, what can we do at this moment so we're not helping to perpetuate injustice? How can we play a role as American Jews, in my case, or as people living in the United States? In my view, this requires standing strong in the support for Palestinian and Israeli peace and justice, and that means supporting the call for BDS until Israel complies with basic principles of respect for Palestinian rights. I support the ethical and, yes, dignified call for BDS as a Jew and as a human being committed to justice and to peace. On a final and personal note, I have always felt and continue to feel deeply connected to my community's history of struggle and resistance, of the anti-Semitism and oppression we've endured. In no way is my support for BDS and my deep commitment to justice for Palestinians at odds with that deep connection to my people. In fact, it grows out of my history and my life as a Jewish person who grew up learning from my deeply ethical parents to be proud of who I was, but to never think that I was better than anyone else or any other group of people, and to fight against injustice wherever and whenever I saw it. Therefore, I will continue to stand to support BDS along with thousands and thousands of others across the globe until there is a just solution rooted in ending state policies that are discriminatory and anti-democratic, and in ensuring equal rights and respect and dignity and safety for all peoples. So these are my reasons for that I consider it my responsibility to support BDS. Thank you.